These are the biggest mistakes when selling a house with tenants in it. If you're planning on selling your house with tenants in it, make sure you don't do any of these things. Starting with the first one, not knowing the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board laws. If you do not know the Landlord and Tenant Board laws, make sure you hire somebody that does. Because you can easily get sued and it can cost you a ton of money. I'm talking 20, 30, 40, sometimes even $50,000. And if your house is under a corporation's name, it can even cost you more. So by not knowing these laws and making a mistake and ending up in the Landlord and Tenant Board because the tenant filed a hearing against you for a wrongful act is a huge, huge mess. Don't do it. Make sure you know the Landlord and Tenant Board laws of Ontario. Which leads me to my next biggest mistake. Do not promise the buyer vacant possession if it cannot be done. You can only offer vacant possession to the buyer with these circumstances. They accept cash for keys and sign an N11, which is a notice to end the tenancy, and you both agree that they will move out upon a certain date. And the next one is if the buyer is looking to move into the property for their personal use, their caregiver's personal use, or their child's personal use, which means you will then serve the tenant an N12 notice of eviction for the buyer's personal use. Now make sure you note if the buyer is purchasing the house under a corporation, you cannot evict them at all with an N12. It does not apply anymore. Big mistake I see all the time, people thinking that they can sell the house to a new buyer, serve an N12, but that buyer is underneath a corporation. Now you can't do it, but the agreement of purchase and sale is already done, so guess who's stressed out and in trouble? You. So make sure you do not make that mistake. Which leads me to my next biggest mistake, not serving the tenant with the appropriate forms. Whatever form you're gonna give the tenant for the purchase or the cash for keys needs to be the correct form, and it needs to be given to the tenant with the correct notice, which is usually 60 days from the time that they pay rent. So you need to make sure that you choose the appropriate closing date on your property when you sell it, so you have enough time to give the tenant the appropriate notice. Because if you don't give them the appropriate notice and you don't give them the appropriate form, that tenant does not have to move out. They can tell you to please file again and start the process over again. So if you have a closing date that your buyer wants, you're now gonna need an extension, and that could cost you money or put you in a legal situation. So make sure you give the tenants the appropriate forms and the appropriate notice. And this is why I also want to talk about another mistake I see happen all the time. Not taking control and allowing your tenants to take control. Before you start the process, before you put the house on the market, you need to have somebody that understands what they're doing go and speak to the tenant so that they know you know the Landlord and Tenant Board laws and that you're in control, not them. This is gonna get you a lower sale price. It's gonna cost you a lot of stress. You might not even sell at all, or they're gonna see that you don't know what you're doing. They're gonna laugh at you or just not listen at all, and you're gonna be stressed out not knowing what to do. So make sure you take control or hire somebody that can take control. And that leads me to my final biggest mistake. Hiring a real estate agent that doesn't know the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board laws, one that's never sold a tenanted property, and they do not know what they're doing. Time and time again, I see landlords getting sued or losing a lot of money, and the truth is they're not even aware of this, but it's actually the real estate agent's fault because they're the ones that sold the house. You're hiring a professional to handle this, and here's the truth. Not every real estate agent knows how to sell a tenanted property. They can get you in a ton of trouble if they don't know what they're doing, because when that offer is firm, there's no going back. So make sure you hire a real estate agent that has sold lots of tenanted properties, dealt with tenants before, and this is not their first rodeo. And if you need help or you have any questions at all about selling your tenanted property, I am a real estate agent that works with a ton of investors, and I've sold tons and tons and tons of tenanted properties in Ontario. Just give me a call, shoot me an email, or send me a text. I'll be happy to help you guys make sure you sell successfully for top dollar and no legal issues.